Hi everyone, this is Koinzell here. So I wanted to do a video on the catch. This is a free weapon that's coming in 2.1, a event weapon, where you will be able to get R5 of it just based on just based on completing the event, and you will likely get over 50% bonus on the weapon enhancement as well. So I definitely recommend pumping this weapon up, because this weapon is not just good for our Raiden Shogun, it's also good for characters like Xiangling, Rosaria, and even Zhongli, because this weapon is good for characters who are dependent on their burst for majority of their damage. On top of that, it gives ER, which is very helpful, because if you are using your burst for damage, you need ER. And it also increases burst damage and crit rate. So at R1 increases 16% and crit rate by 6%, at R5 you get a 32% elemental burst damage and a 12% crit rate boost. So this is a very nice effect. And on top of that, the base attack is not too low on this weapon, it's about medium in 4-star weapons, so 510 at 90, level 90, EI is 45.9. So all in all, I would say the stats and weapon effect for the catch is very nice, which is the reason why I wanted to do a video on it regarding for Raiden Shogun or for Bell. Because for Bell, this is a very good F2P option, and in this video we'll talk about that. And other than that, there are other stuff that I will want to focus in on, such as what is the amount of ER to go for, even on the catch, because there are some varying effects depending on how much ER you go for. And for the purpose of this video right now, I am only looking at the 4-piece emblem. But I think there is potential for, say, a 2-piece Glades with a 2-piece Shiminawa to do well for Bell, because Bell is lacking attack percent. She's going to be lacking attack percent when you use the catch, because the R1, the engulfing, regardless of R1, R5, the engulfing lightning, the key thing about it is it's designed to make up for the biggest flaw when you go for an ER focus kit, which is lack of attack percentage. That is what engulfing lightning addresses. For the catch itself, it doesn't give you attack percent, but it gives you burst damage boost as well as crit rate boost, which will help you in a different way in terms of building your artifacts. You can go for a lower crit rate, and you can focus more on attack percent, because they give you damage boost. And along with the other damage boost sources from Bell, it is pretty good. So first, let's talk about the artifacts and the target ER. We have 3 different permutations here. The realistic one, let me just hide it first. Okay, so like I was saying, right, we have 3 different targets to aim for here. We have a 300 ER, 250 ER, and 200 ER. Based on the ER, it also affects how much crit rate and crit damage you can go for, naturally, since there are limited number of rolls on your artifacts. So we'll compare these 3 different permutations, and in each of these, I'll also talk about what is the sense that we're using, as well as the mean stat. I'm still going to do a attack percent versus a elemental damage comparison. Okay. If you want to know more about how we did the permutation for the ER sources, the damage percentage sources, feel free to check out my first video, the Bell Math video. That is where I explain all this. So I don't want to explain the same thing again in this video, otherwise this video will just become too long. So what we'll do here is we will talk about the points, some quick summary points. I have 5 points in total in this video. And at the last part, we will take a look at the weapon comparison, so that you can look at the damage figures itself. Now, there are 3 different ER targets, as I've just mentioned. So 300, 250, 200. In fact, when you go from 300 to 250, you get a 5.3% damage increase. When you go from 300 to 200, it's a 12.4% damage increase. So basically, 250 ER actually gives you the best DPS, not 300. Even though when you're using 4-piece emblem, it looks like 300 is the target, because that's the max damage bonus you can get from the 4-piece effect. but that's not the case. 200 is your sweet spot in terms of DPS because it allows you to get more crit rolls. It allows you to use attack sense instead of ER sense. But bear in mind that 200 may not be enough to give your burst 100 uptime because 100% uptime because Bell's burst is at 90 energy cost. It's the highest so far. But if you are using a second Electro character with her, for example Sarah, I think it should be enough. 200% should be enough, but this will require some actual play tests to be sure, because we don't know how her particle generation is like. Okay, so personally, I'll say 200 it gives you the best DPS, 300 is the least, but you should go for a ER that gives your Bell a 100% burst uptime. 100% burst uptime means that when the cooldown is finished, you should be ready, your energy should be full for you to cast burst again. So you can do a nice full rotation throughout your teams. So in the meantime, for the purpose of comparison with other weapons, I'll take it that it's 200% ER. We'll just assume that 200% ER is enough for now. When the actual, when it's actually released and we do play tests, then we'll see what actually is the amount of ER required. But 200 definitely gives you the best DPS, which is quite understandable because 100% of your ER then goes to roles like crit rate and crit damage. So for crit rate, because the weapon effect gives you crit rate boosts, we are actually able to go for a lower crit rate than say on Engulfing Lightning. We can go for a 48% crit rate because Bell's damage is all focused on her burst. I mean her elemental skill does help, but it's not high on the damage modifier. What it does more is to buff your teammates' burst damage. Now, what this means is that when you have a lower ER, you can get more CD, more crit damage. But bear in mind, this is almost perfect type of artifact rolls. You only have 4 rolls that can go wrong. Okay, let me repeat that. Across 5 artifacts, you only have 4 rolls that can go wrong. So you need one super perfect artifact, and the rest of the 4 artifacts, you can only have 1 roll that go wrong. The other 4 rolls must be good, very good. So obviously this may not be very realistic, and which is why I do have a column later on for a realistic presentation on how the figures will be like. Okay, but again, for weapon comparison's sake, against Engulfing and other future weapons, when I do the math for those, we will still use the perfect state. Okay. Don't worry about the damage figures. I will do a comparison with Engulfing Light later so that you guys can see how it looks like. As for the damage buff that you get from the Constellation, this is pretty consistent. This is the same as what I covered in the first Bell math video. So remember to check that out if you have not already, because that first Bell math video I really go into detail on each of these how should I put it? Each of these factors for Bell. Like when you go from C0 to C3, what is the damage boost like? From C0 to C1, C1 to C2, C2 to C3, and you also C0 to C3. On top of that, I also cover R1 versus R5 Engulfing Lightning, what is the ER target to meet, etc. So there's a lot of good information there. The video is a bit long because there's too much content for me to cover, but do check that out because that will help you a lot in understanding some of these figures here. So we are done with the first point. So first point, the TLDR on the ER target is 200% gives you the best DPS, but you should target a ER that gives you 100% burst uptime, and we can't say for sure what is her best burst uptime for her until we do the actual playtest, because even for Sarah, we also need to see how her energy particle generation is like, whether or not she's a good battery for Bell, and then we can know how much ER Bell requires. Okay, now let's talk about the second point. Second point is I want to talk about damage versus attack percent Goblet. The first TLDR for the damage versus attack percent Goblet is that at 200% ER, if you have an attack percent Goblet that's better than damage Goblet, especially in terms of crit rolls, it will be better than damage. If it's equally well rolled plus fully maxed out supports like C6 Sarah and EM Kazuha, damage Goblet is still going to be better, but the better, how much better, is ranging from about 1 to 4%. It's not that huge. So this is how it looks like. It looks like with C0 Sarah, and then if you progress on to C6 Sarah, 1200 EM Kazuha with 4-piece set, as well as 1200 Kazuha with a R5 Freedom Sword. Obviously this is real territory, but I just wanted to give you guys a view on how the attack versus damage permutates as you add on more buffs from even your teammates as well. Both attack percent buffs and damage buffs. Okay, so this is how it looks like. There are some scenarios. Okay, the damage Goblet is better. Actually, I should not say 1%. It's actually negative 1%, ranging from negative 1% to 4%. What does negative 1% mean? It means that the attack percent Goblet is still better. Oh, wait, sorry. This is without any buffs. This is without any buffs from teammates. So to be exact, it should be ranging from 0% to 4%. Now, let me just do a quick change on that. So it really depends on what teammates you are bringing, yeah? Because if, let's say if you only have Sarah, Sarah gives you attack percent buff, no damage buff, if you don't talk about the C6 crit damage. So it's 3.9%, it brings you almost to 4%. But if you use a Kazuha, Kazuha gives you elemental damage boost, so your damage cup or goblet becomes less valuable. Okay? So basically, the TLDR for this is very straightforward. Like what I said here, if your attack percent Goblet is better than your damage, it will be better damage. Even if you use this and the damage Goblet is slightly better, if your attack Goblet is well rolled compared to your damage, it's still better. Alright? So with this, you guys will know what to go for. At 200% ER, attack percent Goblet is better. At 300% ER, however, because at 300% ER, you need to use a ER sense. You don't have an attack percent sense. The attack percent Goblet is significantly better. It's almost 10% better, which you can see from these figures here. This 9.676%. This is attack Goblet, this is damage Goblet. Okay, attack Goblet, damage Goblet. So, if you watch my previous math video, you know I always put attack first and damage Goblet next, second. So that's how it looks like. If you guys want, I can just freeze the VP view here. Maybe that will help, yeah? Oh wait, hang on. We gotta unfreeze this because it's taking up too much space. Now these will be better. Okay. So this is so that you can see what is the ER sense, what is the Goblet that we are using for all these figures. But if you're not interested in looking at that, what I can tell you is at 300% ER, attack percent in the Goblet is definitely better. At 200% ER, attack percent is better, slightly better, and only if it's well rolled. This is for the damage versus attack percent Goblet. There are 2 points here, 2 different points for the 300% ER and 200% ER. Now let's move on to the next point. So to conclude, right, the catch is actually really good for a full F2P weapon, full event weapon, and its weapon effect is perfect for Belle. I mean, just look at all these damage figures. It's pretty decent. If you are doing a C0 Belle and you crown her, on her burst initial hit, she's going to deal 61.6k damage. And when you change to her burst melee stance mode with the sword, you do a 4 normal attacks followed by 1 charge attack, you are able to do 61k. So in the first 4 seconds, after pressing her burst button, she can deal about 120k. So for F2P setup, I'd say it's pretty good. 120k damage. I think it's pretty good. What do you guys think? But I want to call out that as good as R5 catch is, or rather as good as the catch is, the R5 catch will still do lesser damage than the R1 Engulfing, which is expected, right? Because R1 Engulfing is a 5-star weapon that you spend money to get, or you spend Primo Gems to get. But catch is fully free and an event weapon. And I'll talk more about this when we look at the weapon comparison. You know what? Let me just look at the weapon comparison now, so we don't jump points. So this is the weapon comparison for the Engulfing versus catch. You'll notice that although you can still see C0R1, but you know what? Let me just move this. Yep, get the whole table in here. So with this, right, what I can tell you is that C0R1 Engulfing versus C0R5 Decatch, the difference is 27.4%. Engulfing does better by 27.4%. If you compare R5 versus R5, it's a 58% difference, which is expected because you're spending a lot of Primo Gems to get R5. Average is about 450 to 500 Primo, 450 to 500 pools to get a R5 5-star weapon on the banner now with the Fate system. So 58% versus 27.4% R1 versus R5 of Engulfing compared against R5 catch. And it's consistent throughout. If you compare C1 and R1 versus C1 and R5, the catch is still 27.4%. Okay? So basically R1 Engulfing is 27% better than R5 catch, and R5 Engulfing is 58% better than R5 catch. Pretty straightforward stuff. Now, this brings me to the last part of the this video, which is to talk about how the realistic artifacts will look like. So give me a moment to switch to that view. Okay, so this is how the realistic setup will be. Let's say you go for an attack sense and attack goblet for 200% ER, crit damage helmet. You are left with 10 rolls that can go wrong out of an average of 22 rolls, 22 upgrades on your artifacts. So this is very doable, very realistic. If you are not super unlucky, let me put it that way. So what this means is that your crit damage suffers because we are talking about getting like realistic rolls, right? So your crit damage is about 150 instead of 160 or 190. Crit is still the same, attack is still the same. Okay, so basically what is lost is crit damage. Of course, depending on your artifacts, it may different. It may permutate differently. But as of now, just a simulation on how a realistic artifact setup will look like. This is the type of crit and crit damage that we will have. And what this results in is damage that looks like this. At level 10, C0, let's say you crown her burst, you're able to do this amount of damage, 54.7k and 54.2k for her M4 1C, which is 4 normal attacks and 1 charge attack. Burst initial hit is 54k, compared to say the C0 R5. But we want to compare 200%, we should compare 200% ER to 200% ER. Okay, so that is why the damage difference is about 26.67%. If you compare a realistic setup versus a perfect setup for 200% ER with attack sense and attack goblet, this is what you get. This is the comparison. So you have 54.7k versus 69k. The damage difference is about 26.67% between these two, between a perfect artifact setup and a more or less realistic artifact setup. So I wish you guys the best of luck in farming for Belle's artifacts. This is the type of potential damage increase you can expect when you go from a realistic to a perfect, which is 26.67% boost. Okay. And to show you guys again, just one final look at the damage figures for her weapon comparison between Engulfing and the Light. At level 9 burst initial hit, these are the figures. Level 9 burst 4 normal attacks, 1 charge attack, this is it. Bear in mind that for Belle, her burst lasts for 7 seconds, so the total damage she does during that 7 seconds is actually going to be this damage plus this, double of this. Okay, that's the total amount of damage she can do. So I'm not going to talk much about the figures, I just want to pause the screen here so that you guys can see the figures. You can pause the video, you can pause this video and see the figures for yourself. Then for level 10, this is the figures. Level 10 burst M41C is this how the figures look like. And then you have the level 12 burst M41C, level 13 burst M41C. But obviously level 12 and 13 requires you to get C3, so it's kind of wheel territory or dolphin territory, depending on how you define it. But at least for C0, you can look at the level 9 and level 10 burst figures, and also C1, C2 if you're interested. You'll notice that C2 gives a huge boost because, like what I covered in my Belfman video, C2 is crazy good. I'll probably do a separate video once I can add more weapons in the comparison. I'll do a separate video to talk about whether or not it's better to go for C2 or based on the weapon that you have, or is it better to go for a R1 engulfing. Okay, but that won't be the next video per se. The next video will be more different type. I would permit more of the different type of weapons, the pull 1 weapons that Belle can use, and let's see how that goes. Alright, now let's go back. Let's go back to the catch video. So the summary is here. Anyone who wants to pause and look at it, feel free to do so. And that's the end of my video for the catch. I hope you guys can see that this is actually a very decent F2P weapon, given that it's purely from the event and you are able to get R5 of it. It's very nice, but obviously engulfing is still better. 27% R1. R1 engulfing is 27% better. So these are the TLDR points, and thanks everyone for watching. If you like the content, remember like video and click subscribe for more. And if you have any pressing weapons that you want me to look at, any weapons that you feel that I should do first in terms of the math, then feel free to mention them in the comments and I'll look into doing it. Alright? So thanks everyone for watching. If you like the content, remember like video and click subscribe for more. Bye!